Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Colorwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals, and I'm here to continue my character retrospective of the characters from House of Dark Shadows. I know, it's been a while. My apologies. Um, this here is about the character Sheriff George Patterson. Now, I'm also going to get into the actor who played him, like I've been doing with the other character retrospectives. The actor who plays Sheriff George Patterson in the movie House of Dark Shadows is one Dennis Patrick. And to DS fans, that's a familiar name. And that's been the point of this retrospective, really. Well, one of the points. This here, as I've mentioned to you guys before with House of Dark Shadows, the cast from the series was taken from the series and put into the movie because fans wouldn't have it any other way. And God bless them. God bless them. And really, I've got to believe neither did Dan Curtis. Dan Curtis wanted it this way too. Um, because keep in mind, Dan Curtis is a guy who took the same cast and sent them back into the past from a storytelling standpoint. He found each of them characters to play, which was cool. Keep in mind too that with Dennis Patrick's character here, he's not playing the same exact type of character he played in the series. Dennis Patrick played two key characters in the series, and when I say key and how key they really were, it was huge. Okay, so in the series, Dennis Patrick played con man Jason McGuire. You might say, well, how is a con man a big deal? Why is that a big deal? It's a big deal for a couple reasons. Number one, Dennis Patrick's Jason McGuire knew Paul Stoddard, who married Elizabeth Collins, who became Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. Paul Stoddard is also the father of Carolyn Collins Stoddard. Do you see a connection here? Now, what's interesting is the second character he plays in Dark Shadows history. I'll get to that, but I want to stick to Jason first. So something happens to Paul, and if you're familiar with DS, you know what is said that happened. What happened is Liz hit him over the head with a fire poker. She thought she killed him. Jason McGuire, who was meeting him later that night, all those years ago, came in. Paul was up and awake, but Liz couldn't see this because the door was closed and Jason was the only one peeking his head through the door. He goes, "Oh, I'll clean it right up." Really, he was yelling. He was telling, like, "What are you doing?" Um, so Paul Starter didn't really die. Um, what's Jason's other significant contribution? How about this? He brings the man to Collinsport who is going to let Barnabas Collins out of his coffin. Now that's important. One Willie Loomis. I've often joked, what is it with the name Loomis and letting some sort of evil out into this world? But it is a true and tried horror statement. And hey, Dark Shadows did it first. Oh my god. Um, well, psycho. Well, Psycho didn't let evil out into the world, but it found it. Now, with Dennis Patrick's other character, Paul Stoddard. Oh, also Jason McGuire is going to be the first person Barnabas kills in the 1960 series. And now I'm talking about this series. I promise I'll get to Sheriff George Patterson. I feel it's important to stress what role Dennis Patrick played in the series. So the other role Dennis Patrick played in the series is Paul Stoddard. And you might say, well, wait, how did one actor play the same role? Hear me out. Okay, initially he's not the first actor who plays Paul Stoddard. For the flashback sequence with Liz explaining what happened that night, the actor who plays Paul Stoddard is Paul Fabini. And mostly you see the back of his head. You see his hands, you see his body, you hear his voice. Um, but you never see his full face. You never see the front of it. Now, later on, during the Leviathan arc, which was prior to the movie, prior to Parallel Time, they recast Paul Stoddard. And who do you get to play Paul Stoddard? An Irishman who was a con man. You get Dennis Patrick. And I love the recast. It it had been a long while since we had seen Dennis Patrick on Dark Shadows. And to see him back again, though his run isn't long as the character, it was still nice to see him on the show again. Plus, we get to see him, and well, now here I am in this movie. But not as a thief, not as a conman, as a man of the law, one Sheriff George Patterson, a name that is long familiar to those at Collinsport, or Collinwood, if you will, but a different actor playing him. And if you'd like to know what actor played him in the series, well, the first actor to play him in the series is one Dana Elker. And if that name sounds familiar to you and you're not a DS fan, yes, he played Pete Thornton in MacGyver, um, the original series. But long before he did that, he played the role of Sheriff George Patterson on the series. Not in the movie, unfortunately, but I love the choosing of Dennis Patrick. I think fans would have really got it. It would have. I think Dana Elker was just too busy for the role at the time. And keep in mind, he hadn't been on Dark Shadows since what, 67, 68. So it had been a long while since we had seen Dana Elker on the show. Don't get me wrong, he is everyone's favorite George Patterson. We do get another actor to play George Patterson, but we all love Dana Elker in the original series. Now, in the movie, it's Dennis Patrick's turn to play the character, but it isn't the same exact George Patterson. As I've mentioned before with these characters in the movie, number one, the movie itself, House of Dark Shadows, is not canon with the series, meaning it's not going off of it, it's not connected to it in any way other than the actors from the show are here to play characters who have the same title, meaning the same name, but not the same said personality necessarily. And if you really want proof of this with Dennis Patrick's Sheriff George Patterson, look at his chemistry with Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. This is clearly a flirtation here, a bit, at least enough to let you know Sheriff George Patterson most likely has had a crush on Elizabeth for a long time. Oh, hi, Liz, Hi, Elizabeth. And really, I love this sort of little, it's so little, right? It's so small of a scene, but you get it enough to go, okay, where in the series there was Bill Malloy, who you could tell sort of had an attraction and an affection for Liz. And now we take that and we apply it in a movie form to Sheriff George Patterson. And it made a lot of sense. This is a sheriff that you could see falling in love with Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, or at least having an infatuation with her. It's Joan Bennett, for God's sakes. Joan Bennett was one, a movie star, and two, if you've ever seen Joan Bennett in her younger years in the 30s and 40s, She's a beautiful woman here too. I love the fact that they do that in the movie. That there's this little hint of, okay, Sheriff George Patterson has the hots for Liz, or at least has a he's attracted to her, at least that you like. The sheriff in this movie does find out about the vampire. Because keep in mind, this is a movie. This isn't a series. This is a sprint, not a marathon. Sheriff George Patterson in the series, Dana Elker's character never found out about Barnabas, and here Dennis Patrick's Dana or Dennis Patrick's Sheriff Patterson gets to find out about him, and also he him and his men do help get Carolyn staked when she turns into a vampire. And really, those are the key differences too, because I've talked about how in the series Carolyn didn't get killed off. Well, for the longest time, she doesn't. Keep in mind, 19 when the movie happens, the 1995 arc hasn't happened yet. Like it hasn't. So by this time that the movie's going on, Carolyn's character never has been killed off. The Nancy. So, which is really, really interesting. It's like, okay, so in 1995, her character, when they do the 95 arc, her character's going to finally get killed off. And that's an amazing feat when you think about it. And with Sheriff George Patterson's character, no, he's not. Obviously, he wouldn't be the sheriff in 1995 when you're doing a future arc in a 70 show, 60/70 show. As I've said before, with the 1995 arc, which is my favorite, and you might say, why is that my favorite? It's 9 episodes. It's only 9 episodes long. That arc specifically. If you've ever heard me say this before, and I'll repeat it here, it felt like George A. Romero had taken over Dark Shadows as a director. No, he didn't really, but that's how it felt. Because if you've ever seen a George A. Romero movie, Doom is imminent, or Doom is at least here. Well, guess what? In those 9 episodes, Doom is definitely here. It's one of the most horrifying arcs, but yet it's a fun watch, and it's only 9 episodes for that arc. So it's not terribly long, but it's just a world of craziness and fun. I mean, Dark Shadows is. Now in House Dark Shadows, Sheriff George Patterson's men in the movie tend to slip up a bit here. This is how Barnabas is able to, get. He knows all the secret passages, and he tends to sneak through one that I think nobody knew about. And he kills one of the sheriffs. Oh my god. Old man Barnabas. Old man Barnabas. But from the Sheriff George Patterson standpoint, so the biggest difference here is this Sheriff George Patterson, played by Dennis Patrick, has a crush. And on Liz. And he does get to help out with tracking Carolyn down and tracking Barnabas down as well. I don't know the exact body count in House. I've tried to go back and watch it too, because my guess is with House, and I'm going to stress this now, that more people die than what we see. Like, okay, we know Carolyn dies. We know that Thayer David's character gets killed off because he gets turned into a vampire. We know that Roger Collins gets killed off. Um, David, we're not sure of. Like, so, but unless he has an off screen that he's not, we're not sure of. Um, I think he lives. Elizabeth, eh, I think she gets. And then there's the sheriff's men themselves. I know at least one of them do die on screen, but we don't see like off-screen deaths are really tricky because we could say some of the sheriff's men gets killed because again our our protagonist is one Jeff Clark. And Jeff Clark isn't in a good chunk of this movie. So, and it's from Jeff Clark's standpoint, there just seems to be no one else around. It's like, okay, how is there no one else around? And you don't see all these cops when, everyone's been looking for Barnabas. It's like, oh, maybe Barnabas killed some of the cops. So I'm not trying to play spoiler here. It's the kill count in House is a bit tricky for me. Maybe somebody could help me out. Oh my god. I don't really do kill counts either on here, so just saying. My next character retrospective is long overdue. It is John Carlin's Willie Loomis of House of Dark Shadows. Alright, guys, hope you enjoyed the character retrospective of Sheriff George Patterson, played by actor Dennis Patrick.